I'd gotten a call from my friend mid-evening. I had already settled down with a few drinks for the night, but I picked up the phone anyway. He was sobbing over receiving a final warning at work and was scared to be alone, so I told him I'd grab a ride and be there soon. I wasn't about to risk a DWI and wanted to cut through the end of rush hour quickly, so I called an Uber. Waiting outside, I checked the app to see what kind of car I should be looking for. An orange Volvo, pretty hard to miss, with a middle-aged white guy as the driver. I noticed he had 5 stars, which is really unusual, but I didn't think much else of it. When the driver pulled up, he wasn't in an orange Volvo. He was in an older silver sedan. Nothing decrepit, but definitely not what I usually get. He said his regular car was in the shop when I asked. Since his photo matched up, I went ahead and got in. I'd taken Uber a billion times, and I was a lot more worried about my friend being alone. As we approached the end of the street of my apartment complex, the app wouldn't register that I'd been picked up. He circled the complex to see if that would trigger the GPS, but no. Every minute I was a little more panicked that I'd get to my friend's place too late, and he seemed to pick up on that. Well, I might as well drive you anyway. Just give me a good rating if you're prompted. AI agreed, and we got on the major road. You're actually my first ride. I started with Uber this morning. In my initial panic, I hadn't noticed a few things. The first was that the Uber light in his window was just an LED behind a piece of paper, not a lamp linked to the app where you can change the color to find your car. I also hadn't noticed he didn't have a phone mount and seemed unable to access GPS outside of the Uber app. He kept asking for directions. I pulled up my Google Maps to direct him and realized everything he told me in our small talk was a lie. He'd claimed to live in our city his whole life. I've lived here not yet 5 years, and I can find my way around without GPS on major roads. Who knew where this guy came from? I've learned from past jams that calling a creepy situation out is likely to make it worse, while nicing your way through it might get you out unscathed. So I made conversation and let him do most of the talking, mentally noting any details so I could notify Uber later. He went from having lived in my city his whole life to moving here at 18 and staying. He claimed to have 6 grandchildren, which seemed like a stretch for someone who didn't appear to have hit 50 yet. He pointed at a large house off the major road casually, saying he owned it. Definitely weird stuff, but nothing inherently dangerous at that point. I could sense he was getting annoyed at the clacking of my nails on the phone while texting my friend. There is no secret texting in my life, and this was no exception. I explained I was checking in on my friend to make sure he was waiting on me and had the door unlocked. He didn't say anything and put his focus back on the road. My GPS started rerouting us, and I asked where we were going. He said I could turn it off because he knew that part of town and there was a shorter way. I kept the GPS on and made sure I'd silenced my phone completely. We wound up in the parking lot at Fisher Park, close to downtown. It was sketchy, but there were a few other cars in the lot, and Fisher Park is surrounded by neighborhoods. The driver unbuckled his seatbelt and said he needed to make a call. I tried to keep my face calm and my voice cheery with an okay, no problem. He walked off about 20 feet and was trying to keep his voice low, but I could tell from the reddening of his face and the spit flying from his teeth that he was angry. I heard a truck approaching at the adjacent road and used the background noise to cover my slight opening of the door on the opposite side. It's the wrong one. You fucked up, and now she's on to me. Some noise on the other end managed to come through, but I couldn't understand it. We agreed when you first came up with this stupid plan that there was no room for mistakes. She's playing nice right now, but we've got to ditch the plates as soon as I drop the bitch off. At this point, she's bound to file a report. More noise, a little louder this time, but still unintelligible to me. No, I am not bringing her to you. Fuck you, Jason, meet me at the Circle K in 30 or I'm out for good. He came back to the car. I managed to tug the cracked door shut when he settled into his seat. Sorry about that, my roommate locked himself out of the apartment. He can be a real jackass and wanted me to come over and let him in, but let's get you dropped off first. I made sure to keep my breath steady and my eyes on the screen as the driver got back on the GPS route. After about 5 minutes, we got on the same block as my friend's apartment, and I said he could drop me off there. I smiled, thanked him for the free ride, and rushed to my friend's door. I was somewhere between panicking over him not answering and my mind wanting to defragment what had just happened when the door gave way. I spent a few hours calming my friend down and coming up with a game plan for work. I told him I'd had a weird Uber experience, so he offered to drive me home, even though the rain was pounding outside. I'd been home for about an hour when my phone dinged. It was my friend who had dropped me off. Holy shit, Em, is this the guy that drove you? Attached was a link to our local news website. Breaking: Police sign high-speed chase with suspects in multiple missing persons cases. I saw the mugshots of two men. One was my driver looking a little worse for wear. The other a younger man named Jason. They'd both been in and out of trouble for breaking and entering, as well as a few drug distribution charges listed under Jason. Apparently, they were the last to be seen with the victims after a string of missing persons reported over the last 7 months. So, human remains had been found at the now abandoned trailer they'd last been listed as occupying, along with a cache of illegal bear traps. A broken mini fridge containing several bottles of what was believed to be a codeine opioid substance. 3 large animal crates, and a room of tools all soaked in DNA. All of the missing persons were women in their 20s and 30s with red hair. The police had been able to link Jason's Tinder page with several of the missing women as well. Apparently, the police recognized the driver and Jason from their mugshots at the Circle K when the confrontation and subsequent chase commenced. I reached up and patted the side of my head subconsciously. I'd just touched up the purple dye over my naturally red hair the day before. I'm nearly out of college now, about a week away from my graduation. My degrees lasted me 4 years, and due to my father's death 2 years ago, I've paid for half out of my own pocket. Now, living in Detroit, jobs are hard to come by. I was damn near dropping out to join the army just to be able to live before a buddy of mine recommended driving for Uber. I do it on weekends. You get an oddball every now and again, but it's decent cash, he said to me after a lecture one day. I already owned an electric car, old 2009 Toyota Prius, so fuel wouldn't be a massive issue. Besides, I was and still am an extroverted person, so I love meeting new people. So, I started driving. I enjoyed it, for the most part. What my buddy had said was not too far off the truth. But shit, I'd be lying if I said I'd recommended it. Especially if you live in Detroit. There have been times where I've been so scared I've had to get new seats, let alone new pants. But since I'm about to end my short career working for Uber, I figured I'd compile all the memorable moments I've had into a piece of writing. So, yeah, here you are. 1. I did a pickup once for a slightly older looking dude from a nightclub. He got into the back seat with a significantly younger woman who seemed either really drunk or really high. I couldn't quite tell, but I could smell liquor and weed, so really it could have been either, if not both. The guy, on the other hand, seemed pretty sober. Naturally, this sent of massive alarm clocks in my head, but I decided not to ask questions and just drive them to where they wanted to go. Neither of them said anything for a while, and because it was so late at night, I wasn't really feeling a conversation either, so I didn't say much either. I kept looking back at this dude for a while though. Something about him just wasn't right. He was older than most of my clients, around 40 to 45, with slicked back dark gray hair and brown eyes. No facial hair either, save a small tuft on his chin. The most notable part was his teeth. Whenever he smiled, which he was for most of the trip, I got a glimpse in the rearview mirror. They were crooked to the point of looking jumbled, like they were just dropped into his mouth at any odd angle. Most of all though, they were sharp, like seriously sharp. They looked like they came out of some sort of carnivore, not a human. This really gave me the creeps. The worst part was yet to come. When we finally arrived at his destination, it wasn't a house. Well, it hadn't been a house for years. I'm sure you have all seen the photos of abandoned houses on abandoned streets in Detroit, and this house looked just like that. Nevertheless, I pulled up to the curb. "Are you sure this is the right address, sir?" I asked, while checking my phone to make sure I had gotten it right. No response. "Sir," I ask again, still looking down. No response. Finally, I look up into the mirror to see nothing. No one was in the back seat, not the girl or the man. I checked, and the doors were still locked. I wouldn't normally, but when driving around certain areas you need to lock the door. How the fuck would they have gotten out if the doors were still locked? Also, my hearing is in pretty good condition. I never even listened to loud music, so I would have heard them leave. Also, looking outside the windows, I didn't see anyone walking. It was a real job. I had been paid for the trip, so it's not like I had imagined the thing somehow. To this day, I have no idea. 2. In Detroit, a lot of people go missing. Adults and kids. It just so happens that I transported a man and who I thought was his son out into the middle of bumfuck nowhere, just for the dude to kill the kid and burnt the body. At least that's what the police told me after rounds upon rounds of questioning. You see, after I had finished that trip, I called it a day and went to the local corner store on the way home to pick up some things. And lo and behold, who do I see on my milk carton other than that same fucking kid? I called the police, and it went from there. They never found the guy, but have linked him to 3 other missing children in the area. This one still messes with me. 3. Here's one that more what the fuck than particular creepy. I picked up this guy once from a small house a little ways out of downtown. He was tall, at least 6'4", and quite lanky too. I was in a good mood that day, so I tried to make a bit of conversation. I like talking with my passengers. As I said before, I enjoy meeting new people. Anyway, this guy says almost nothing, like one-word responses to every single question. Eventually, we get to his destination, another small house about 10 minutes drive from the pickup point. He gets out, says goodbye, and everything seems normal. I drive off, and must have made it to around 30 memph when I hear a knock on the window. It's the same guy running. He motions to pull over, which I do. In a shock, I roll down the window to ask him what's up. Sorry, I left my phone in the backseat, no context to the fact he just ran faster than anyone ever. Initially, I thought my speed dial was fucked, but I had it checked, and it was fine. 4. I always save the best, or in this case worst, depending on how you look at it, to last. So here's the one that keeps me up at night. I pick up this woman just outside of downtown around midnight. She hops in and starts to berate me, asking me why I took so long. Taken aback, I apologize. She immediately starts to break down and cry, sobbing, and just tells me to drive. The trip's a long one, half an hour to the airport. Along the way, she starts to talk several times before just going back to crying. Eventually, she spits Ty out. He's coming after me, that's all she said. I asked her if she needed me to call the police, but she said they wouldn't do anything for her. He's gonna take me away. With him, she blubbered out between quite sobs. She went on to say other things, but they were inaudible mumbles. The last thing she said before I had to drop her off was, "The Nain Rouge, and he's getting close." Yeah, that was all the motivation it took for me to get her out and for me to speed off as fast as my shitty little Prius could go. The Nain Rouge, for those of you who don't know, is what I once believed to be another bullshit fairy tale about a little demon that roams the streets of Detroit, causing all the bad things to happen for the city and dragging people back to wherever he came from. Not being a superstitious person, I never believed in it. Now I do. Why? Because when I checked the news later that day, the woman I had picked up was found dead. Not too strange, but definitely creepy that they found her body. The part that got me was the fact that police said she was dead for at least a month before they found her. I have a few more stories that I might tell tomorrow, but if you're from Detroit or if you just have any info on the Nain Rouge, I'd love to hear it, because the last sighting of it was back in 1976, but I know it's still around. Coming from the Midwest, you anticipate that you're going to run into some unusual people and things out in this city. Los Angeles definitely doesn't disappoint. Whether it's getting held at gunpoint outside of my apartment, or seeing a homeless man get run down in the streets in Thai-town, all are things that I'm not used to seeing coming from Indiana. I'm dime a dozen out here. I came to Los Angeles to pursue the arts like every other smo around. The trick about this city is finding a job where you can actually keep afloat, while maintaining some sort of flexibility so that you can accommodate the volatile life of auditions and meetings. Uber and Lyft are the perfect solution. When you sign up for both platforms to drive, you're told that you'll likely get some unruly folks and what to do in said situation. I carry a small knife on me, and even though you're not supposed to have a weapon, just try and think of how much of a disadvantage you're at if someone is sitting right behind you. If you need proof, watch that video of the former Taco Bell executive psycho wailing on the Uber driver in Orange County. Yikes. I've been driving for both services for about a year, and I've never really had an incident. Sure, a drunk UCLA student tried to punch out my backseat window on a Friday night, but we've all been there, right? Everything changed recently, and I haven't driven since my encounter with the person I'm going to tell you about, and I met her 2 weeks ago. 11:45 p.m. on a Wednesday night. Out here, it doesn't matter what night it is. People are out and about, and you rarely have to wait long for a ride. I was parked on Santa Monica and Cahuenga when I got the request. Pick up Carol located 0.4 miles away. Let's do this, Carol. I arrive at the address given, but no one is outside. Not unusual. I begin messing with the radio and getting the aux cord set in case Carol wants to play some sweet jams, and that's when the rear right side door opens. I look back, and I'm confused. Carol is old, like early 80s at least. Odd to see someone in this demographic this late on a Wednesday evening, but I've had others in the age range, so I write it off as not a big deal. How's it going tonight? Carol, I ask. No response. She struggles in, and shuts the door behind her. I glance in my rear view mirror and study her face. No emotion whatsoever, almost as though Will Smith had just flashed the neuralizer in her face. Where are we headed tonight? No response. Can she hear me? Does she not speak English? Then my phone beeps. New destination entered. 1900 N Vermont if I throw the car into drive. It's not a lengthy car ride, but I figure I'll try one more time. It's usually pretty easy to gauge if someone wants to chat or not. Are you from Los Angeles? I ask in one last attempt. I glance in the rearview mirror, and she's staring right at me. Her gaze is piercing me. In a deep, shrill voice, she answers, I wouldn't worry about that, okay, lady. I get it. I'll just drive you to your destination. We're a ways off from the destination she entered when she speaks up, drop me off at the next corner. I look up in Excelsior, and I ask, are you sure? We're still a mile, just stop AT the next corner, she snaps at me. I pipe the F down. My full-blooded Norwegian father didn't command that kind of attention when he would speak up in a room. I wanted her out of my car, so I was happy to oblige and stop. I pull off on a quiet corner a few blocks off of Fountain Ave. I slightly turn my head to look over my right shoulder to say something like have a girl's eye. But as I turn my head, I see that she's leaned up in between the seats, just inches from my face. I freeze. I can't speak. I can't look at her. Only down at the median in between the driver's and passenger seats. Her breathing is something I'll never forget. It was deep breaths in such a strange cadence, almost like an irregular heartbeat. She put her pointer and middle fingers on my shoulder, and my eyes finally meet hers. I'm terrified. Her touch was ice cold. I was wearing my Colts hoodie, and her fingers felt almost like ice directly in contact with skin. Her eyes weren't black, wide open, or any other cliche of a maniac, but sad, almost motherly. My terror shifted. Before I could say anything, and before she stepped out of my car, she said 3 words that forever changed my life. Take the stairs. I stared back at her with a look that said, excuse me. She didn't repeat herself, but leaned back and away, and exited my car. I sat there watching her slowly waddle away into a beat-up apartment building, and then out of my sight. What the hell was that? I wasn't going to give any more rides that night. I turn off the app and drive back to my apartment in Koreatown. Currently, that's where I'm sitting, my head still in my hands, trying to comprehend what happened. I stumbled into the back door of my 8th-floor apartment building that night. I live on the 7th floor. This place has been standing since the late 1940s. By the time I come in, it's around 12:30, and not even thinking, I hop up the back stairwell. Usually I'm lazy as hell, and take the rickety old elevator. I get to the 4th floor when I hear it. Screech, hush, bam, bam, boo. An engineer had done repairs the day before, and I remember the note slid under our doors from the beginning of the week. April. A beautiful girl on the 8th floor had hopped on the elevator to get her laundry out of the dryer. Right at the same time I had gotten home, 2 of the main cables snapped, and the elevator crashed violently down to the ground floor, fell 7 stories. April's family came and got her stuff a week ago, and I'm still thinking about Carol's warning. Take the stairs. The night was still young as I cruised the outskirts of Golden Gate Park. I waited patiently for a ping from the Uber app. I needed the extra cash as I was in danger of being short on my rent. The phone chimed as I looked to see someone in the outer sunset needing a ride. The picture was a blonde woman with a big smile, and I accepted. It said she had 2 passengers, and the pay was decent. I found a spot to make a U-turn and made my way to a small parking lot. I thought nothing of it at first. It seemed like a young couple who were about to have a night in the bay. It was curious, though. I could see the woman dragging a man with black hair towards the car. She dragged him by a thick leather leash attached to an even thicker collar. I had witnessed lots of things in the city, but even this was new to me. The car door opened and I asked, Lisa? Yes, that is me, she replied as she sat in the back seat. I looked at the man who stood outside. He looked hesitant to get in the car. She tugged on the leash with impatience. Get in here, Henry. Is he okay? He's fine. My husband just seems a little out of tonight, she replied. The man sat in the car slowly and seemed to be just staring into space. I know that it can be wise to wear layers when in the city, but the man was wearing a rather large hoodie that was much too thick for an August night, even for here. So we are going to the Tenderloin, right? Yes, if we could get there as quickly as possible. That would be great. I was having trouble with my car, and we can't be late. All right, well, let's get moving, I said. While I looked in the rearview mirror to make sure the two were buckled in, I noticed the man's collar was very tight around his neck. I could see the red marks on his skin. The dark brown leather was strange as it had symbols embossed on it. I had never seen anything like it. I didn't think much of it though. I was more concerned by how tight it was and how it looked like there may have been a struggle to put it on him. The woman noticed that I was looking at it too. She frowned and asked, "So are you going to drive or not?" We hit the road and headed toward the destination. We drove in silence as I tried my best not to look back at the two. I did notice that the man called Henry started to look puzzled as he stared out the window. "Is everything okay back there?" I inquired. "Everything is fine," Lisa remarked. "Where are you taking me?" Henry asked with a strange tone to his voice. It was monotone and sounded like he was half asleep. The woman scowled at him and tapped him the chest, signaling for him to be quiet. It was clear who was the dominant personality in the relationship, but I still found it quite odd. "You know where we are going?" "Henry the First told you several times." "You told me that you were taking me to the temple." "No, I told you we were going to a party," Henry Lisa replied as she looked frustrated. I looked back in the mirror to see the man had a look of worry in his eyes. I felt that something was right with this woman. It seemed like the man was out of it. I started to think that he was on drugs. "What kind of party?" I asked as I looked at the woman who frowned. She didn't like me asking questions. I could see it in her eyes. She was trying to think of what to say. Like, is it a costume party? Does it matter? "I am just trying to make conversation. Sorry. I want to know what kind of party it is," Henry mumbled as he looked at me. The woman grabbed his leash and then tugged on it hard. I could hear as he struggled for air and coughed. It was aggressive and showed a flash of anger. The sight of it made me uncomfortable. "It's a sex party," she answered while she loosened her grip on the leash. Henry coughed, then smiled a little bit. I curled my eyebrow as I looked at the two in the back. "That's why he is wearing a collar, because he likes it. Whatever floats your boat." I am not one to judge. An awkward silence fell in the car. I continued to drive to the location as Henry continued to keep his eyes locked on me in the mirror. He tugged on his collar and said, "She is lying to you because she is planning on killing me." Lisa tugged on the leash and growled, "Shut up, Henry. Stop joking around. It isn't funny and you are going to freak the poor man out. Are you in danger, dude?" "I am, because this woman is not my wife." "Don't listen to him. He likes to make people uncomfortable for his entertainment," Lisa said. "Then why don't you show him what is in your pocket?" "Listen, I don't want any trouble. I don't want to see what she has." "She has a weapon in her pocket," Henry said, as he lifted his hooded shirt to show a cut across his stomach that had been recently stitched and burned shut. It explained why he was so out of it. The man had to be miserable with pain. "She used it on me earlier and put this collar on me." "Shut up," Lisa yelled. "Oh Christ, dude. Do you need to go to the ER? I just want you to get me away from this woman and take this collar off," Henry pleaded. I started to hit the brakes, but then I felt something cold along my neck. I looked down to see the blade against my throat. "Keep driving, or I will have to kill you," Lisa growled as I could feel it pressing against my skin. I lifted my foot off the brake and began to accelerate again. I could feel my hands tremble on the wheel. All right, just don't hurt me. Then just keep driving and you might live to see another day." "I have a thought," Henry grumbled. "Shut the hell up," Lisa yelled back. "Yay, let's just do what she says." "How about you hit your brakes hard," Henry replied as he looked out the window. "I don't see much traffic, so just trust me. Don't listen to him. If you want to live, I would do it now," Henry responded. I watched as he lunged at the woman and startled me enough that I slammed on the brakes. The knife fell into my lap, and I caught a glimpse of the weird jagged blade. It had the same symbols as the collar. The car screeched to a halt, and I heard Henry shout, "Take the collar off now." "I am begging you, don't listen to him," Lisa pleaded, as I turned awkwardly to see he had her pinned down. I reached in the back and realized it was my chance. I took the collar off from Henry and heard a growl that sounded like a wild animal. He smiled as he plunged his hands inside our captor's chest. The blood sprayed, hitting the interior and the window. "That's much better," Henry remarked. I sat back in my seat, taking a glance at the mirror. Henry smiled back at me and exited the car. He walked around the window, tapping it lightly. I rolled it down in shock. "Thank you," I thought for a moment. I was nearly done. "Henry, we need to call the police?" I asked nervously. "I don't go by that name anymore. You can call me the Legion." Okay, I responded, as I watched him reach into his pocket. I started to become nervous again. I thought I would die that night. He could see the fear on my face, to which he smiled back to me. "Are you going to kill me?" "No, I owe you. You saved my life," Henry answered, as he grabbed my hand and placed cash in it. I looked to see a few $100s. That should pay for the cleanup, and a little more. "What the hell are you?" "I'm a demon that will end the world. But don't look so scared. At least I tipped.